Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Revenue. Has he sought advice from the Treasury on the impact of multinational company tax avoidance on the government's fiscal position? If so, what was the advice he received?
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
As I explained to the House during question time last week, Inland Revenue does not distinguish on the basis of whether companies are multinational or not. Treasury and Inland Revenue do provide estimates of revenue gains from specific policy initiatives, for example GST on online services and intangibles. Tax avoidance, where companies are not paying what they legally owe, is cracked down on. I expect all companies to pay the correct amount of tax on their net taxable income, regardless of where they are owned.
Mr Speaker.
Point of order. Grant Robertson.
Mr Speaker, the question asked the Minister if he had sought advice. He offered some views about what Treasury and IB might or might not do, but he didn't answer that part of the question.
No, on this occasion I don't believe that question has adequately addressed it. The way forward, it's an attempt to answer it. The Minister's responsible for his answer. The way forward is to allow the member 2 extra supplementary questions.
Supplementary
Grant
question.
Robertson, supplementary question.
Has he sought advice from Treasury on the quantum of multinational company tax avoidance and its impact on the fiscal position of the government?
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, the question cannot be answered in the way the member asks.
Order. 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 The question's been asked. It doesn't require commentary now as the answer's been given. Michael Woodhouse.
It would require the Inland Revenue to make an assessment of a fact that they do not know. It's a quantum question to something that is not known. What I expect is that they work diligently to ensure that all organisations and individuals pay their fair share of tax, and I'm satisfied they're doing that.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question. Grant Robertson.
Do it slowly. Has he sought advice from Treasury on the quantum of multinational tax avoidance and its impact on the government's fiscal position?
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Slowly. No, because asking such a question would be a ridiculous waste of Inland Revenue Department's time, because they would be asking them to chase their tails.
Mr Speaker.
Order. Supplementary question. Grant Robertson.
How is it responsible for the government to have not asked its chief financial advisors to quantify the impact of multinational tax avoidance on its overall fiscal position when estimates range into the multi-billion-dollar area?
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, estimates are just that. They are fingers in the air based on people's value judgments about what organisations that have certain turnovers in this country should be paying on tax. And I can't remind that party often enough, they don't seem to get it. New Zealand entities do not pay tax on their gross revenue. They pay it on their net taxable income, and I'm satisfied that that's what they're doing.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary. Order. Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
How does he defend his failure to even quantify the scale of multinational tax avoidance to a small business owner who's working hard, doing the right thing and paying their fair share of taxes, or would he rather join the Prime Minister on the side of mega-rich tax dodgers?
The last part of the answers are the questions out of order. The first part can certainly be answered. The Right Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, I encourage the member to take a slightly broader perspective on this issue. There are a number of large companies that use their New Zealand-based entities as a means of getting product into New Zealand. Along the retail pipeline, for example, products like, I don't know, fuel, would be then retailed by companies in New Zealand that pay the tax. The analogy would then be for, say, Silver Fern Farms selling lamb to London to have to pay UK tax. They're not. Waitrose are, Asda are.
Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
What credibility can New Zealand have being part of international discussions about cracking down on multilateral tax avoidance when it emerges that we're in the club of 21 tax havens revealed as part of the Panama Papers, and his government refuses to acknowledge that that's even a problem?
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Well, Mr Speaker, it's not for me to re-answer the questions, the very good answers that were given by the Prime Minister in his questions. Suffice it to say, I agree that New Zealand is not a tax haven when the definition of such is absolute secrecy. Quite the opposite is the case. But I would also remind the member that to the degree that there is multinational tax avoidance taking place, this is a global problem that requires a global solution, which is why we're working with the OECD.
What a supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Can he not see that New Zealand's ability to argue for our fair share from multinationals is fatally compromised by his government siding with the mega-rich tax dodgers who are exploiting our trust laws? Or is that actually an intentional policy so that lawyers and accountants can get some money and our reputation gets trashed?
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, the question simply doesn't warrant a response, but I will say this. The member needs to be careful what he wishes for. Silver Fern Farms selling lambs into London, Fonterra selling formula into China would, on the regime that that member suggests, be liable for tax in those countries. Our responsibility is to ensure everybody pays their fair share of tax in New Zealand. This government deployed $20 million to ensure that that was happening, and I'm satisfied that that's money well spent.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Why did he not respond to IRD's statement to him in 2013, or to his predecessor in 2013, to protect our international reputation? It may be necessary to strengthen our regulatory framework for disclosure and record keeping. Why did the government not respond to that warning?
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Well, Mr Speaker, the question is now delving back into the area of foreign trusts, not base erosion and profit shifting by multinationals. But I'm satisfied that Inland Revenue are nimble in making the changes to things like the thin cap rules, the permanent establishment rules, the non-resident withholding tax rules, and rules for GST on online purchases that ensure the maintenance of this country's revenue base.
Question number